The first videos I ever made were analysis of Marinette, Adrien, and Gabriel. In making those videos, I realized that Marinette and Gabriel are actually kind of similar in the way that they're both obsessive. Marinette had an unhealthy obsession toward Adrien, and Gabriel had many unhealthy obsessions, specifically toward curing his wife and getting Ladybug and Cat Noir's Miraculous. So ever since then, the topic has intrigued me, how similar Marinette and Gabriel are at first glance. So I decided to really look into them and try to compare and contrast them. That being said, initially this video was just going to be about how Marinette and Gabriel's obsessive tendencies were similar. And if there were any other similarities I noticed, I would have gotten into that as well. Well, I did just that and more, much more. So this video isn't going to just be about that. I wanted to say this beforehand because I might seem to go off topic and start reaching and driving things a lot of the time, but I swear I have points in all of this. So that's why the video is longer than my other videos. I didn't want to find a way to split anything up because everything is connected and has a lot to do with each other, so I just thought it's time to make a longer type of video. But anyway, to sum up what I'm going to be talking about in this video, or my point, or my thesis if you will, is that Marinette and Gabriel share a lot of certain similarities, yet they're on opposite sides of a divide. One represents good, the other evil. The struggle between good and evil is a timeless theme in religion, ethics, and philosophy because it reflects the everyday moral issues we face. There's always a choice between what's right and what's wrong, but ultimately good and evil are two sides of the same coin, which is life. Life is full of contradictions. Things that appear separate often blur into one another, making a line between them far less clear than it seems. So why am I getting so philosophical, you might ask? Because that is the point I reach in this video. Like I said before, this topic came about from something I already analyzed in the past, so a few things that I mentioned here might be a bit repetitive, but I do say a lot of new things, so there's a lot of reasons of why I bring up a lot of old things. Anyway, to start off, like I already said, Marinette and Gabriel are similar at first glance, at least to me, because of their obsessive tendencies. Marinette had a really big crush on Adrien at the beginning of the show, but it was borderline unhealthy and weird, and it's finally addressed and worked on in later seasons. Her obsession was unhealthy for a lot of reasons, but one of them was because her crush involved a fake idea of Adrien. Ideas, perceptions, images, and everything having to do with that is actually a really big recurring thing with Marinette and Gabriel. But for Marinette, an example of it is the Cat Noir and Cat Walker situation. Marinette didn't exactly have an obsession with Cat Noir like she did with Adrien, but something about him had ticked her off in the past, and it was the way he displayed himself. It wasn't until he changed himself and became Cat Walker that her perception of him did a 180. It makes sense because he did change himself, so he wasn't the same as before, but the fact is that it was literally the same person, but she still managed to like one version more than the other. In other words, this all just means Marinette has an issue when it comes to appearances. Adrien displayed a fake image of himself to please his father, but even if he didn't present a fake appearance to everyone, Marinette still would have had a fake, made-up, and highly exaggerated idea of him because she never got to really get to know him. Because everything she knew about him back then wasn't due to her ever actually hanging out with him and getting to know him. Because we all know how nervous and shy she would get around him, she was never able to stand at least a second in front of him. So everything she got to know about him was due to her stalking. When it comes to obsession or limerence, people may see their crush on a higher pedestal, which means they see them as a much better version of themselves than they really are. They don't notice any flaws because they like so many aspects that they dismiss anything that could be bad. A really good example of Marinette seeing Adrien in this way was in the episode Desperada, when Jagged Stone was looking for a new guitarist. Marinette recommended Adrien, who didn't even know how to play guitar, over Luca, who was actually a really good guitarist. Marinette was just blinded by her crush on Adrien that she failed to recognize Luca as a better recommendation. One of the traits of limerence is that a person may be unable to have multiple crushes at one time. Again, I mentioned this in the other video, but you can see this in Marinette's entire relationship with Luca, since we know Luca was a really good guy and Marinette could have had a really good relationship with him, but that didn't work out in the end. I know it was really because she was keeping secrets from him, but it's also obvious that a big part of that also had to do with her still liking Adrien. That's proven by her instantly falling right back in love with him after her and Luca broke up, and after Adrien and Kagami broke up. It really didn't take much for her to fall right back in love, or didn't take much for her to start pursuing him again. Something else I failed to acknowledge previously was that Marinette choosing Adrien over Luca was a major point in that episode, Desperata, since she ended up having to give someone the snake Miraculous. She was so stubborn in giving Adrien the snake Miraculous due to her crush that she failed to see Luca as the better option. But she ends up learning this the hard way anyway, in the episode. This is off script to me. While I'm editing, I wanted to include this in this video, but without a script, because I want you to hear like actually how I really feel about this, because how am I going to express how I feel, like my actual opinion on this, if I'm reading off something? So this is me just talking. But basically, this trait that Marinette has that I'm talking about, like, and this is just like her main personality trait, or at least this was like one of her main personality traits, her crush on Adrien and the way she behaved around him and about him. This is actually the reason why I didn't like her that much as a character, and that's probably obvious. You can probably tell, like, it's no surprise that I wouldn't like her because of this, because it made her really strange, obviously, and I didn't like her for that. Like, I didn't like how devoted and like how in love she seemed with Adrien over basically nothing, by basically just having an impression of him, because she didn't really know him for who he really was. But she still claimed to be so in love with him. Like, it's all that. Basically, her behavior throughout like season 1 through 4, I did not like. And it's not like I didn't like her at all. Like, I still like her, but she's not my favorite character because of this trait. So that's just my honest opinion on her. That's how I feel about her. Anyways, continuing with the actual topic of the video. I'm not professionally educated on any of this, but just based on what I've learned, so this is just my own hypothesis, I guess you could say, is that I think a big part of obsession isn't really for the goal. At least in the case of limerence, I know that it's not true love. The true intention behind the obsession or the crush is literally just to be in love, even if that's subconscious. What that means is that the person who behaves limerently is satisfied, pleased, soothed, whatever you want to call it, by behaving and feeling this way. So something about feeling like you're in love is fulfilling. This doesn't seem like it fits Marinette's case, but in essence, her crush on Adrien, or the behavior she was displaying due to her crush, was, at its core, meant to comfort or reassure her. We know that the reason she acted the way she did was because of the trauma she went through with liking Kim. She didn't know he was really a jerk, so she told herself she wouldn't like a guy ever again without knowing everything about them, so that she'd know if they were possibly a jerk. It was a precaution for her. So, when she fell in love with Adrien, her crush toward him and the behavior she ended up inhibiting was precautionary, to reassure her that Adrien was a good guy, the good guy that she had envisioned, and that she had nothing to worry about. She could keep being delusional and have Adrien up on this pedestal. Something I never acknowledged in the past, though, something I overlooked, was the episode Perfection, when Marinette admits that the root of her unhealthy obsession with Adrien, her lack of confidence and self-esteem, came from her fear of not being good enough. And this didn't come out of nowhere. We can see this fear with her image in the episode Copycat, when she stole Adrien's phone in order to delete the message she accidentally sent him. It was an embarrassing moment, so it makes sense, but she went as far as stealing his phone in order to not be humiliated and protect her image. She goes out of her way to protect her image again in Volpina, when Lila lied about her, or about Ladybug, to Adrien. And in Frettingale, she was upset about Chloe playing her in Claire Nightingale's music video. So in the same way that Marinette had an obsession over appearances and images, so did Gabriel. In many ways. In a more grown, mature, and concrete way, Gabriel also had the same interest in fashion. This interest is a big part of Marinette, but with her it's more child and dreamlike, since fashion is her hobby and dream career. For Gabriel, it was his job and less dreamy, which probably has a lot to do with his personality and the way he used fashion in the show. I honestly feel like their interest in fashion reflects what may be expectations versus reality, or childhood and adulthood, because Marinette's version of fashion is so dreamy and innocent, while Gabriel's version is just so calculated and soulless. But anyway, at first glance, fashion seemed like one of the tools Gabriel used to control Adrien. I bring up the topic of fashion when talking about appearances because fashion was Gabriel's brand, and his brand was an image, a facade. At the end of the day, everything he worked for, everything he abandoned from his old life by marrying Emily and joining a higher society, led him to create his brand. And brands are all about appearances. Their models, their icons, everything. Before I get too ahead of myself, I really want to point out Gabriel's past and how he had to basically create a name for himself. Because that's literally what he did. He changed his last name to Agreste and created a family with that name. He did this in breaking away from the lower class society he no longer wanted to associate with and in becoming part of a higher society, maybe even becoming one of the most influential ones. So it's clear Gabriel had a really clear, idyllic vision of his life, and more on that later, that even the Agreste name was a part of that. The Agreste name and the creation of it is symbolic to me of the ambitions Gabriel always had. So it all comes down to the name Agreste because even that was created by him. So think back to all the times Gabriel scolded Adrien. The time he even told him to go through with it like an Agreste. It's not because Gabriel wanted Adrien to do it as he would have done it, but it's the way he always envisioned, the way he always wanted it to be. That is truly what it means to be an Agreste, to be part of a goal, an aspiration, a vision, an idea, and nothing more, because even that was made up. So it was really just crazy how Gabriel would dictate Adrien this way by telling him to do it as an Agreste, because there's really no meaning behind that. The Agreste name was created just like everything else in their lives. But anyway, going back to the initial creation of this name. With Gabriel's new life also came the need for a good reputation. So like Marinette's interest in images, in her own image and appearance, Gabriel also had an interest in images and appearances. The show makes it clear that he wasn't always so evil. He was once a good father to Adrien, so something must have broken inside of him when Emily became sick. When she was sick, he spent most of his time looking for a cure. The anxiety overcame him so much that he started to neglect his son. It's clear that this was the beginning of that obsession, of curing Emily. But I think this must have also been the catalyst for every evil thing inside of him, because he was literally never the same after this. I'm only able to make this note because in my previous video analyzing Gabriel, I noticed that he was a bad guy for many reasons, and although those reasons were different from each other, I realized they all must have had the same root. So now I say that it all came from Emily's illness. Gabriel didn't actually become a bad father until Emily became sick. So this was when, I repeat, something actually had to break inside of him for all of these things that were so important to him back then to become twisted in the ways they became twisted. I use the word broken because I've heard the term before when talking about people who go through something so traumatizing that they're never the same again. That's what trauma is. It's something so bad that it hurts the person's ability to process things emotionally and mentally. So it's clear that's what Gabriel went through. Emily's illness was so traumatic that as a result, so many aspects of his life were harmed. It's clear how bad Gabriel's hyperfixation became because he was still searching for a cure even after Emily died. You would think that if his goal was to cure Emily while she was sick, but she ended up dying, that at that point, he would have stopped. She was already dead, so what more could he have done? But since he had broke, his goal and his grief became twisted, and his desire to cure Emily overlooked death. So not even death could have stopped him. Going back, a lot of the things that were important to Gabriel became twisted, and again, one of those things was appearances. After years of the importance on appearances, having a good reputation, and becoming so famous built up, Gabriel gained a really strong sense of grandiosity. In other words, he became really narcissistic and self-centered. You can see that in a lot of ways, but significantly in the episode Pretension, when he goes on to Marinette that he had the ability to give her the future she wanted.
You know, I remember the hat you created for Adrien. You're talented. And with my support, the daughter of the local bakers could become the world's greatest designer.
He went on to support this by basically saying he created people's everyday options, and in doing so, tricked them into thinking they're making their own decisions when really, he was the mastermind behind all the choices they made. So he was the one with all the power. All in terms of fashion, since he owns such a large fashion company that no one notices how big of a presence it truly has on everyone's daily life.
Life is like fashion. You think you have a choice, but all you have is the illusion of choice. And I decide what choices are given to you.
I feel like this could also relate to how he was Moth. Ever since Lila became the new Butterfly Miraculous holder, it's been easier to identify what kind of manipulator Gabriel was, since now we can compare two different people. It's clear to see now that Gabriel was actually never a manipulator to begin with, or not as much of a manipulator as Lila. Lila, as Chrysalis, is such a cool and compelling Hawkmoth because of the way she manipulates her victims. And that was something Gabriel really lacked back then. But it's now obvious, at least to me, that as Hawkmoth, Gabriel felt more entitled and superior than everyone else, that he would only present his victims with what abilities he would give them and force those things on them, whereas Lila at least gives the victim more sense of power with her manipulation techniques. She sympathizes with the victim and makes offers to them, even allowing them to choose their own names. Whereas Hawkmoth would recognize the victim's negative emotion, tell them that he had the ability to make things better, and just force that on them while telling them that in return he wanted Ladybug and Cat Noir's Miraculous. So this trait that Gabriel had of self-importance and superiority in power is really reflected through his career, his brand, and in the conversation between him and Marinette, and in his role as Hawkmoth. He created options and basically forced those things on people. And to me, it all just reflects the kind of evil he was. You can even see a sort of similarity to how Gabriel akumatized people to how he tried to bribe Marinette. He would suggest a better outcome to his victims and say he would give that to them, using his abilities. And it was the same with Marinette, how he had the ability to ensure her future as a fashion designer. In response to what Gabriel said, Marinette says,
"Fashion is about listening to people. It's about understanding who they are, what excites them, and creating the clothes that will help them express their inner world, help them connect with others, and make their dreams come true."
I just really like the banter between them in Pretension because although they talk about the same thing, fashion, they have such different lenses toward it, and to me, it really just contrasts what is good and evil. Gabriel is the evil, and Marinette is the good. She sees only good things in fashion, whereas Gabriel is very self-centered about it all and skews it based on his perception of himself. In his banter to Marinette, he says,
I create an idyllic vision, a perfection that everyone aspires to achieve, while keeping it just out of their grasp. You listen to people's desires and create what they want. Somehow, people make you.
It's clear to see that Gabriel thinks that hearing other people, understanding them, and creating for them is like a disservice to yourself, allowing other people to have power over you. And I think we can just take those things and see how much better of a person Marinette is because Gabriel sees these things as liabilities and all of the above. I think even just what Gabriel said to Marinette, people make you, is such a good reflection of what a truly good person is. A good person is full of love and unity within themselves, and that could really be represented by a unity of people and love between others. Kind of like how a superhero's role is to protect people. I make the connection to heroes because that is what Marinette is. So she's a creation of all the people she serves, not just as a hero, but in her everyday life as well. I got this next note from the Miraculous Ladybug fandom wiki page, which basically says that as a designer, Marinette has learned to take inspiration from many things and shows it through Ladybug. Her suit changes to resemble Mr. Bug's suit. Her magical charms resemble the charm Alia has attached to her phone. She starts styling her hair the same way as her friend, Socoline, who was also a role model for her. And now, her and Cat Noir have taken aspects from Shady Bug's and Claw Noir's looks, which is a tribute to what they taught each other to believe in. Hope, themselves, and others. So it's clear to see how much Marinette really is a product of the things in her life. But that in no means is a bad thing. This symbolizes all the love and support she has in her life and her willingness to accept others. It's a good reflection of the love and open-mindedness she has, which is all things Gabriel failed to see and to possess himself. I want to talk more about Marinette's selflessness and her care for others. She was a really caring girl in her regular civilian life and as a superhero. When she became guardian and leader of the Miraculous superhero team, she had to learn how to become a different kind of leader, leading her to become a kind of protective mother figure. Even now in Season 6, after the death of Gabriel, Adrien needs all the love and support he can get. So Marinette has really adopted this role of a kind of caregiver and protector, something Gabriel could never be as Adrien's actual father. So this just comes to show, or contrast, what Gabriel as a parent should have been and what he failed to do.
I create people's desires. They buy what I decide they'll buy. They think what I want them to think. I'm the one who makes people.
This just shows the sense of importance Gabriel had. how much powerful he felt over other people, because he kind of did have a point, I'm not even gonna lie. But the way this warped and shaped him to think he was above others, and how he felt so entitled and able to do more than just dictate the choices people make, to the point he even thought he makes people. So the difference between Gabriel and Marinette, the difference in how they see something as simple as fashion, could all simply be a reflection of the good and evil inside of them. Bringing back what I talked about earlier, one of Marinette's really important traits was how she didn't feel good enough. So she was insecure about that. And in contrast, Gabriel felt more than good enough, to the point he felt like he was superior and deserved more than anything anyone else deserved. I just feel like these traits in their essence is really good embodiments or representations of what the true meaning of good and evil and the everlasting debate between them is. And even more so, it's clear just how Gabriel truly embodies the essence of evil because of how well his values match those of the highest evil there is. Before I continue, I don't want to scare anyone away by saying this, so heads up. But basically, Gabriel Agreste is so evil that he even almost perfectly embodies the values of Satanism. Satanism includes a lot of different beliefs, and there's many types. But a lot of those beliefs and types have one thing in common, which is that a lot of them emphasize the importance of the self in doing what's best for you. A philosophy that relates to this is Epicureanism, which says that the ultimate human goal is happiness. So it values hedonistic living and egoism, which means people only help others if they get something in return. Right off the bat, you can see this in Gabriel, since all he wanted was to be happy with his family, and as Hawkmoth, he only helped people by granting them powers in order to get something in return. So he wasn't helping others out of the goodness in his heart. So even though for the longest time, I believed Gabriel wasn't that interesting in the way he was Hawkmoth and the tactics he used, it's clear to see how much he truly embodied the values of evil. He wasn't the smartest villain, but he definitely had the darkest of intentions. So applying what I just said to the conversation between him and Marinette, she told Gabriel what fashion or life really is. It's about listening to people, understanding them, and what excites them to create what will help them connect with others and make their dreams come true. Which is all in simple words, love. Marinette embodies everything that's good here. Love and altruism, which is exactly what Gabriel opposed. As I said before, he saw this as a liability, allowing others to have power over you, because you should do everything for your own sake, even if that gives you power over others. Satanism is literally about this, rejecting love because it puts you at the mercy of others. But again, there's a lot of different types of Satanism, so this belief here doesn't encompass it all, but it is a part of it. Going back to what I mentioned before, it was clear, at least to me, that Marinette had always been in love with a fake idea of Adrien, since he was forced to present himself the way his father wanted him to. Well, this is confirmed when Gabriel says to Marinette,
"You think you love Adrien? But you're just under the spell of this world I've created. A world where Adrien is a star, shining high above. A world where you're just a part of the crowd below looking up at him."
Again, Gabriel basically says that the world revolves around him. His world is so small that he sees himself and his son on a much bigger scale. Another value of Satanism is social Darwinism, which is the survival of the fittest, basically meaning that some people are inherently superior and destined to succeed, while others are inherently inferior and destined to fail. Again, this is another very obvious value for Gabriel. But in terms of selfishness, survival of the fittest only exists because people like Gabriel see themselves at such a high expense that they feel like they deserve all the happiness and success in the world. I want to now move on from his and Marinette's conversation from Pretension because a lot of this is brought up again in Recreation. Monarch tells Bug Noir,
"There are people who are content with following the rules, and people who bend the world to their wishes. You played Guardian of the Miraculous. I reinvented their magic. And once I've taken yours from you, I'll reconfigure the whole universe too, as I proclaim my wish."
Again, after all this time, after all of Gabriel's authority and formation of the world around him has accumulated so greatly, he thought he had the ability to manipulate the universe as well. Technically, with the Ladybug and Cat Miraculous, he could have, but the fact is that he felt so entitled to it. And in response, Bug Noir says this,
People only have the illusion of choice, as you say yourself.
Now, I feel like at this point I'm looking really deep into it, but this is the only explanation I can come up with. And I only say this too because I feel like this is getting way too philosophical for a kids show. But again, at the end of the day, it was the kids' show that started talking about reconfiguring the universe and created a character like Gabriel Agreste. So, whatever. Anyways, I feel like Bug Noir's response to Monarch was meant to put him back in his place, right? By using his own logic against him. In saying what he said, Gabriel meant he was the true driving force behind everyone's lives, that he had the power over everyone to manipulate their lives and authorize them, making him think he could do the same with the universe. But Bug Noir reminded him that not even he was on the same scale as what would be a god, and he was just the same as those people he thought he manipulated, by having the same choices as them. Even his options were created by something higher than him, and that is the underlying force of everything, the universe itself. Whatever you want to call it. But even Gabriel himself was manipulated in the way he thought he manipulated the people below him. This being said, religious skepticism is another aspect of Satanism, which denies superstition and divine intervention and is basically atheistic. Because of this, bringing back what I explained earlier, Satanism puts more importance on the self, and that the individual person is the most important entity. So when it comes to Gabriel, and everything that at least I picked up from his battle with Bug Noir, it's clear to see that Gabriel believed that nothing could stop him, that he had the right to do all the bad things he did because he had the power. This reflects the Satanist belief in no God, and that people themselves have the same power that a god could have. Okay. I went on this rampage because I was comparing Marinette's and Gabriel's interest in fashion, which is crazy because how to get to this point. But anyway, backtracking from that, this interest comes from the interest in appearances, and a lot of that connects back to Adrien. Like I said, Marinette was obsessed with the idea of Adrien, and so was Gabriel. But this also means that they both loved him at the end of the day.
If you meant what you said earlier, then we both want the same thing. We want Adrien to be happy.
I mentioned earlier how before, I didn't see Gabriel as much of a good or interesting villain simply due to the fact of how stupid he really was. But my opinion is starting to change. Now I really do see him as an embodiment of true evil. But that aside, the fact that Gabriel was really stupid really contrasts Marinette, who is really smart as Ladybug. It's clear she uses logic and tries not to be fooled, whereas Gabriel clearly wouldn't think hard enough because he never came up with any true master plans that succeeded. So, just how good and evil can be two sides of one coin, intelligence and foolishness could be as well. I honestly don't think I have a better way of transitioning to the end of the video, so I'm just gonna sum up what my point of making this video was. I feel like in looking at these aspects of Marinette and Gabriel, it's clear to see how people are able to have such different outlooks on the same things, showing the different ways human nature is inhibited in different people. We all see the same things, live through the same things, and yet people still manage to go on living with completely different views. My final thought, and the thought I want to leave you with, is that after all of this, after realizing how similar but different Marinette and Gabriel are, it really makes me realize that if you really think about it, Marinette could actually be Gabriel. Marinette has all the traits to go down the same exact route as Gabriel. If we were to see more of her life later on, and if something as traumatic happened to her as it happened to Gabriel, I could really see her falling down the same path as him. They both started at humble beginnings, Marinette the daughter of bakers and Gabriel the son of fast food restaurant owners, and who both fell in love with people with higher statuses than them. That, and all the other traits they have in common, I really don't see why Marinette wouldn't have the potential to become exactly like him. Anyway, it's not like I'm saying I think she will become evil during the span of the show, but what I mean is she definitely has the potential to. So at the end of the day, I actually see Marinette in Gabriel, and Gabriel in Marinette. Miraculous Ladybug is no stranger to the idea of duality, to two sides of the same coin, or to yin and yang. Ladybug and Cat Noir represent creation and destruction, good luck and bad luck. But surprisingly, Marinette and Gabriel also managed to represent this as well.